Deacon, for having this, just hearing and allowing the public to come speak. If you realize that you're giving our children poison, why would the answer be to figure out a better way to train the people administering the poison? There are experts that can be cited, mathematicians, people at the Dana Center who brought all this in, who are experts, but there's also experts that have quotes like this. Chris Tinkin from Seton Hall, connecting an individual's education achievement on a standardized test to a nation's economic future is not empirically or logically acceptable, and using that mythical connection for large-scale policymaking is civically reckless. When education leaders and those who prepare them parrot that argument, they actually provide credence to the anti-intellectual myths. When school administrators implement programs and policies built on those faulty arguments, they commit education malpractice. When you look at, and I've testified before about Common Core not being about a set of national standards, it's about a philosophy of education. And that's what this is. It's a philosophy of education. And as a mom of a 4th grade student who can empathize with the parents because my child cries at night doing math homework, and he's not going to remember how wonderful his 4th grade teacher is, which I remember who my wonderful teachers are. He's going to remember the nightmares and going to bed crying. And so as a parent, I'm asking, can I see what you're teaching my child? Where have these new rigorous tests and standards, where have they been piloted and proven successful? Or is my kid the guinea pig? Can I see how you're teaching my child? What's the professional development of the teachers? Who's doing that professional development of the teachers? Are they getting their professional development from the Dana Center, who's also doing the professional development for Common Core? Who among you will stand up for our kids, your grandkids? I can protect my child, but I can't protect his generation. I also ask you to ask, can I see who's financially benefiting from the curriculum products that my child's teacher is being evaluated on? It's interesting that the ESCs own the copyright, or owned the copyright to C-Scope, now Teach Resource Services. Isn't that interesting that the ESCs are the ones doing the professional development for our teachers and our school districts?
Let's finish your thought. Are you going to finish?
Yes, please let me finish.
Yeah.
What we know is legislation has been passed that has gotten us where we are today. You heard it in the social studies review process. When Senate Bill 6 passed, it opened up Pandora's box. Because no longer did Texas have the stronghold to control what was in our textbooks, because that permanent education fund was used to purchase those textbooks. When Senate Bill 6 passed, now that money can be used for online curriculum, for professional development. It's no longer just about textbooks. That money can be used to purchase those textbooks without going through the review process. The book that you questioned on the other day, which now they're following through and hopefully making those changes, they can sell that book directly to our school districts without even going through the review process, and it only has to cover 50% of the text. So when we're looking at solutions, what do we do here? When you're recommending legislative agenda, I would say fix Senate Bill 6. The other, we passed HB 462 that said no to Common but there's no consequences. And then we passed HB 5 that sets up the same philosophy of education, the workforce development model of education. That is the Common Core philosophy of education. So I'm asking you as a solution to be a leader. If you don't have the jurisdiction over it, you represent the parents. You don't represent the TEA or you represent me and my child. So do what you did the other day, what Ken Mercer did with the AP US History, and expose what's happening, stand tall, and be a leader, and call on our elected officials like Greg Abbott, like Ken Paxton, who's going to be our Attorney General, and ask them to be leaders too, because they're parents and they're grandparents. And our children need leaders. We don't need to continue to deliver the poison when we know that the poison is more and more kids are being turned over to behavioral and mental health practitioners because of what they're being asked to do in school. They're depressed, frustrated, their self-esteem is tanking. And that's what we're seeing because this new philosophy of education is coming in.
Okay, go ahead. Let's go to Q&A.
Yeah.
So,
Which school district are you from?
I'm in Argyle ISD. And let me just say, I am so blessed to be in Argyle ISD. We're having a community meeting on Monday night so that I can report back to parents that that meeting is not being controlled by the school board and the administrators who get their talking points from TASA and TASB. It's being controlled by the parents who are asking the questions because we're doing the research and we're showing up here and then we're taking it back to our community so we can educate parents. So that when you do stand up as leaders and when you do push back against whether it's the college board or whatever, that you have parents who are just as angry that the SAT and the PSAT and all these national assessments are aligning, and that's the excuse for why we've got to do these kind of teaching strategies, because everything's aligning to the Common Core. If you stand up and expose it, and we as parents and educators back you up, that's how we fortify our state from the federal government.
I have a question. And I'm so sorry. And I'm asking a lot of questions because I genuinely want to understand where this conversation about Common Core is coming from. Now, and where I stand one way or the other is personally has nothing to do with how I make decisions, because my district, I speak for the parents in my district as well, and they may not see things from your perspective, but I do listen for my district. What I do have to ask, and maybe you can help me with this, is we've got a lot of really concerned parents that have come. They've done their research, which I think is amazing. But are you all looking at the resources that you're going out and doing your research through? Are those maybe Common Core latent resources that maybe you all aren't aware of? And that's where you're sort of bridging the link between Common Core and our state standards, because...
Actually, my resources are people like Dr. Jim Milgram, who is a part of the standards. Dr. Sandra Stotsky. These are the people that we're on conference calls with, and they said no to the Common Core national standards. And I would, as a recommendation, I would like for Dr. Milgram to look at the implementation and what's actually happening.
And actually, ma'am, I have a question from Monica, because Dr. Milgram's name sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah, so Dr. Milgram, for anyone who's not aware, was one of the state board's experts. He advised on the development of the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. He also testified before the legislature in support of the essential knowledge and skills that we're discussing today. So he was part of
He
this
was
process.
Thank you. He was part of the process in creating those SBOE standards. So now you're testifying and you agree with how he has helped develop, and I guess that's where the disconnect in me understanding
I
where
would
this
like
is
to
coming
know
from.
from the standards team, or the teams that actually develop the standards, how much of his opinion did you listen to? Or because
It's on the
what we
website.
know- Okay.
If you go and look on the website, they cited when they made changes based on his feedback. He met with the committees and provided a lot of guidance in this process and provided guidance to members of the board.
So then I would say then you have to look at implementation and methodology.
We can't do that.
Okay, you can't do that, but you can be a champion for exposing, okay, if we have these standards, but it's just like CSCO. They said that CSCO aligned with the Texas TEACs, but what we know in reality is what CSCO created was huge gaps. So just to say that it aligns doesn't mean that it actually aligns. And when you listen to Dr. Milgram, and you listen to what he talks about, the standards. We had a conference where he came and spoke, and he said, someone asked him, who's behind this? What's behind this? And he said if there was one person he could name, it would be Linda Darling Hammond. And what's interesting is if you talk to the ESCs, they're using Linda Darling Hammond and Grant Wiggins' philosophy of education. I had a meeting at Region Service Center 11, and I said, did Linda Darling Hammond write CSCO? And she said, no, you don't understand. It was written for Texas teachers by Texas.
We're not talking about a CSCO.
Well, I know, but it's the same thing. It was written for Texas teachers by Texas teachers, but they're using Linda Darling Hammond's philosophy of education. So if you pass the TEACs, but then the ESCs and those doing the professional development are using the Common Core philosophy of education to implement it, that's where you're harming our children.
Okay, and I just want to follow up on a question that was asked in Ms. Linahan's testimony about piloting the TEACs. I mean, is there can you kind of speak to that? Is there some kind of process that you kind of go through with that? I mean, in terms of field testing, some of that.
Well, we want to be careful with terminology. Field testing is the assessment.
Right, exactly.
As far as any sort of a pilot, that has not historically been part of your process.
Right.
Certainly is something that as you move forward with review and revision, I think you are continuing to look at your process, but that is not something that has been done with any of the standards as they've been revised.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
And just as a follow-up, so what effect would that have on assessments?
It could get complicated, so that may be a discussion that we'll have to have as you think about what this process will look like moving forward.
Linahan, thank you so much for coming. And